Why is it so hard for us to accept being pruned and dealt with? Why do we shift our focus onto others, developing biases, even becoming slack and resistant? What is the nature of our rejection of being dealt with? What corrupt disposition lies behind it? Let's watch the testimony video, Reflections on Rejecting Being Dealt With, to find out.
In 2021, I was assigned to water newcomers with Li Xiao. At first, I wasn't familiar with the work, so Li Xiao would patiently help me, telling me the principles and demands of the work. After some time, I slowly got the hang of things. So when she reminded me about certain issues, I figured I already knew and didn't listen. This later caused mistakes to appear in my work. When Li Xiao saw them, she pointed them out and reminded me to be more diligent. At first, I agreed that I did lack diligence, and her chiding served as a good reminder for me. But over time, I kept having glaring issues in my work. I failed to do tasks assigned to me, impeding the work's progress. When she saw these mistakes happening over and over, she then adopted a harsher tone of critique and would even scold me. "Why didn't you remember? Where is your work?" I knew that she only said these things so I'd quickly rectify my problem and get better results in my duty. But hearing her using that admonishing tone put me off a little. I thought, she makes it seem like I'm blatantly careless in my duty and can't do anything right even after such a long time. What would the others think if they heard about this? Even if there's problems, can't we discuss things calmly? I'm willing to learn. Forget it. From now on, I'll just avoid her. That way she can't scold me. After that, I didn't give her the time of day, and would even give her dirty looks at times to make my dissatisfaction known to her. Sometimes I needed to discuss work with her, but I worried that if I did seek her out and she discovered some issue in my work, she might chide and deal with me. Wouldn't that make me look even worse? Later, when I had to discuss something with her, I'd wait until the last possible moment, or just let her seek me out before speaking up.
That must have really delayed your work.
Yes.
It did. But at the time, I didn't recognize my own issue, and just stayed stuck in that state. As time went on, Li Xiao became constrained by me. Once I overheard her say that she freely gave suggestions to others, but felt constrained when she was with me. At times when she noticed certain problems in my work, she wasn't sure what to say to me and feared I might get angry if her tone was harsh. Hearing this, I felt a bit guilty. But then I thought, if you had a gentler tone, I wouldn't be this way. You're too arrogant. Thinking this, I was not self-reflecting. Later on, my supervisor found out and fellowshipped with me, telling me to reflect on myself first before shifting my focus to others.
Yes.
Outwardly, I could discuss self-reflection with the supervisor, but I felt wronged and thought the issue was with Li Xiao. And so, every time I talked about my state, I would emphasize how Li Xiao took a harsh tone with me to show the supervisor that my displays of corruption were all due to Li Xiao's arrogance. I hoped the supervisor would fellowship with her and get her to change her harsh tone.
Through knowing yourself, you spoke of others' problems. You weren't really reflecting on yourself.
That's right. So how did you finally come to recognize your own problem?
Yeah.
At the time, another supervisor saw I hadn't recognized my issues and fellowshipped with me on her own experience, She also read this passage of God's words.
Oh.
In the church, some are pruned and dealt with because they haven't performed their duty well. And there tends to be a note of rebuke, and sometimes even censure, in the words pruning and dealing with them. The recipient certainly isn't pleased and wants to refute what is said. They say, "These words dealing with me may be right, but some of them are just too harsh. They're humiliating and upsetting." As a believer for years, my contribution may not be grand, but I've worked hard. How can I be treated like this? Why isn't someone else being dealt with? I won't accept it. I'm not having it. Is this a sort of corrupt disposition? Yes. This corrupt disposition only manifests in the forms of grievance, defiance, and resistance. It has not yet peaked or reached its extremity, but the signs are there, and a crisis point is close. What attitude do they take in the immediate aftermath? They will be unable to submit, and feeling distressed and defiant, will begin venting their indignation. They will rationalize and give justifications. Leaders aren't always right when dealing with someone. The rest of you may accept this, but I don't. You only accept it because you're foolish and cowardly. I won't accept it. Let's argue if you don't believe me. We'll see who's right. The others fellowship with them, saying, "Whoever's right, you need to submit first. Could you do your duty fully free of impurity? Is all you do right? And even if it is, being dealt with will be helpful for you. We fellowshipped on principles with you many times, and you haven't listened. You've gone on being blind and willful, disrupting the work of the church and causing serious losses. How could you not be dealt with and pruned? What was said was fairly strict and harsh, but isn't that normal? What excuse could you have? You won't let others deal with you when you do something bad? Does the recipient then accept it? No. They keep giving excuses and resisting. What then is the disposition they are revealing? It is demonic, a vicious disposition. And what are they getting at? I am nobody's fool, and nobody can touch me. You should know not to mess with me. You'll think twice next time, and then I'll have won, won't I? Well, their disposition is laid bare, is it not? It is a vicious disposition. People with vicious dispositions are not simply sick of the truth. They hate the truth. Faced with being pruned and dealt with, they either evade it or ignore it. Their hatred of truth goes very deep, certainly deeper than a few words of reasoning would suggest. That's not how they really feel. They are defiant and resistant, and they will challenge you like a harridan, while thinking, "You're humiliating me, deliberately putting me on the spot. I see what's happening here. I won't contradict you directly, but I'll find a chance to take my revenge. You're dealing with me and bullying me, no? I'll get everyone over to my side, leaving you isolated. I'll show you what it's like to be targeted like this." These are the words in their hearts. And their vicious disposition has finally revealed itself. To achieve their goal, to vent their indignation, they do their best to give rationalizations and excuses, trying to get everyone on their side. Then they are happy, and their equilibrium is restored. Is this not malice? This is what it is to be vicious of disposition. Amen.
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 God's words exposed my exact state. I'd been perfunctory and careless in my work, and had failed several times to do things Li Shao had assigned, delaying the work. This was my mistake. It was right of her to point out my issue. Even though her tone was harsh, it was for my own good and the good of the church's work. But I didn't reflect on myself at all. I'd even thought that she didn't respect me and was singling me out. I gave her dirty looks because I felt she'd made me lose face in pointing out my issues. I'd made her feel constrained. I realized I'd been unreasonable. When pruned and dealt with, I not only failed to reflect, I twisted things and called her arrogant. I even used my chances for self-reflection to complain about her, hoping the supervisor would deal with her. I had a truly vicious disposition. Realizing this, I felt a bit ashamed. Later, I found this passage of God's words. When most people are pruned and dealt with, it can be because they exposed corrupt dispositions. It can also be because they did something wrong due to ignorance, betraying the interests of God's house. It may also be because their attempts to muddle through their duty harmed the work of God's house. The vilest reason is when they do as they wish without restraint, violate principles, and disturb the work of God's house. These are the primary reasons people are pruned and dealt with. Regardless of the circumstances surrounding this, what is the most key attitude to have toward it? First, you must accept it. No matter who is dealing with you, for what reason, whether it comes across as harsh, or what the tone and wording, you should accept it. Then you should recognize what you've done wrong, what corruption you have exposed, and whether you acted in accordance with the principles of truth. This is the primary attitude you should have. Amen.
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 Through reading God's words, I've learned there is a reason why we are dealt with. In most cases, it is because we don't seek principles and live by our corrupt dispositions. It's because we're damaging the church's work that we are dealt with.
Right. This dealing with is done out of responsibility to the work and to protect the church's interests. It's a positive thing. After being dealt with, no matter whether or not we can recognize our issue, we should accept it, reflect on ourselves, and seek principles of actions. This shows acceptance of the truth. It's the attitude one should have when being dealt with.
Right.
Right.
Thinking back on my time with Li Xiao, when I had been unfamiliar with the work, she'd taught me patiently, step by step. But I would often just muddle through. I was hardly meticulous, and avoided my assignments. As a result, our progress was held back. Only then did she deal with and chide me. She was hoping I'd reflect and correct my actions. She wasn't blowing up on me without principle. But I didn't accept the truth, and didn't reflect when she chided me and offered me suggestions. Instead, I placed my focus on her and her actions. I thought that she was picking out my flaws when she took a slightly harsh tone with me and was embarrassing me and making things hard for me. I was resistant and couldn't accept it. As a result, I missed many chances to learn lessons. My own life entry was damaged, and the church's work was delayed. I had been so unreasonable. I then reflected on why. Despite the fact that her criticism was clearly helpful to me and beneficial to the church's work, I somehow couldn't accept it properly, even developing a bias against her. As I sought, I found these words of God. When it comes to the matter of being dealt with and pruned, Antichrists are unable to accept it. And there are reasons they are unable to accept it. The main one being that, when they are dealt with and pruned, they feel they have lost face, that they have lost their status and their dignity, that they have been left unable to raise their head in the group. These things have an effect in their heart. They are loath to accept being pruned and dealt with, and they feel that whoever prunes and deals with them has it out for them and is their enemy. This is the attitude of Antichrists when they are pruned and dealt with. Of this you can be sure. It is in pruning and dealing that whether someone can accept the truth and whether someone is truly obedient is most exposed. Antichrist's resistance to pruning and dealing suffices to show that they are sick of the truth and do not accept it in the least. This, then, is the crux of the problem. Their pride is not the crux of the matter. Not accepting the truth is the essence of the problem. When they are pruned and dealt with, Antichrists demand a nice tone and attitude. If the doer's tone is serious and their attitude is severe, an Antichrist will resist and be defiant and grow furious. They don't care whether what is exposed in them is right or whether it is a fact, nor do they reflect on where they've erred or if they should accept the truth. They think only of whether their vanity and pride have suffered a blow. They're entirely unable to see that pruning and dealing are helpful and loving and salvific, that they are of benefit to people. They cannot even see this. Is this not a bit undiscriminating and unreasonable? So when Antichrists face pruning and dealing, what disposition pours forth? Without any doubt, it is one of being sick of the truth, as well as one of arrogance and intransigence. This reveals that the nature and essence of Antichrists is one of being sick of the truth and hating it. Amen.
Amen.
From God's words, I learned that Antichrists by nature despise the truth and covet status. When dealt with and pruned, they know the criticism is accurate, but because it makes them lose face and exposes their true nature, they're unwilling to accept it. They'll even reject the person that deals with them as a decided enemy.
Yes.
I had the same disposition as an Antichrist. At the time when Li Shao pointed out my issues, I'd known what she said was true, but I hadn't sought the truth or reflected on myself. I refused to accept her helpful suggestions due to the fact that she had directly exposed my inadequacies and made me lose face. I'd thought she was making things difficult for me. In order to protect my reputation, not only had I been hostile, making her feel constrained, I'd even complained about her to my supervisor to make the supervisor deal with her and prevent her from calling me out. I realized that I had a truth-despising disposition just like the Antichrists. Someone able to accept the truth will find it helpful to have a partner that points out their flaws. This way, they can avoid doing their duty in a way that is dictated by their corrupt disposition and avoid disruption to the church. This benefits both them and the church's work. As such, they're able to accept other people's pruning and criticism.
Right.
But clearly, I was filled with corruption and inadequacies, and there were problems with my work. But I didn't want anyone to point them out. When they did, I demanded that they do so tactfully, so I wouldn't lose face. When what they said threatened my reputation, I reacted by treating them like an enemy, and found ways to exclude them. Without any thought to the church's work or to their feelings, much less with any reverence for God. I was walking the path of an Antichrist, and if I didn't repent, God would detest me and cast me out.
That's right. This has been a big problem for me, too. In the past, I recognized that I had a strong desire for status, but through your fellowship of experience, I see my very nature is truth-despising.
Right.
If we don't deal with this disposition, it can be quite dangerous.
Later, I found a passage of God's words. How is constructive speech expressed? It is mainly encouraging, orienting, guiding, exhorting, understanding, and comforting. Also, sometimes it is necessary to point out and criticize others' shortcomings, deficiencies, and faults directly. This is of great benefit to people. It is truly a help to them. And it is constructive for them, is it not? Say, for example, you are especially willful and arrogant. You've never been aware of this, but someone who knows you well comes right out and tells you the problem. You think to yourself, am I willful? Am I arrogant? No one else dared to tell me, but they understand me. That they could say such a thing suggests that it is true. I'll spend time reflecting on this. Then you say to them, other people only say nice things to me. They sing my praises. No one gets personal with me, or points out these shortcomings and issues in me. Only you were able to tell me, to get personal with me. It was so great, such a big help to me. Was this not a heart-to-heart? Little by little, the other person shared with you what was on their mind, their thoughts about you and their experiences of how they had notions, imaginings, negativity, and weakness in this matter, and were able to escape it by seeking the truth. This is having a heart-to-heart. It is a communion of souls. Amen.
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 Through God's words, I learned that, aside from words of encouragement and comfort, speaking to people in a way that confronts their issues and points out their inadequacies is also quite helpful. Sometimes we live by corrupt dispositions and don't see our own problems, and words that deal with and expose our issues can be even more beneficial. In the moment, we may lose a bit of face, but this criticism and support can inspire us to come before God, to seek the truth and reflect upon ourselves. This is truly beneficial for our life entry.
Yes.
Right. This is what real care between brothers and sisters looks like.
Yes. I didn't place importance on life entry and wouldn't actively reflect on myself. Li Xiao was in close contact with me, so she had a very clear sense of the issues that existed in my work. She had a sense of righteousness, worked responsibly, and could directly point out my issues and aberrations. She might have been untactful, even a little harsh, but she was truly trying to help me. Even in the moments when she felt constrained by my corrupt disposition, she didn't hold it against me and collaborated with me regardless. It was only later when Li Xiao dealt with and exposed me that I felt distressed and understood that I needed to come before God to reflect on my problem. Gradually, I started to rectify my attitude and my duty. These improvements all came as a result of Li Xiao chiding and dealing with me. But I didn't know what was good for me. I thought that when she took a harsh tone with me, she had it out for me and was picking at my flaws. So I kept avoiding, resisting, refusing to accept, and didn't focus on reflecting on myself. In the end, I didn't change at all, and missed opportunities to gain truth. How foolish I was. If I had been paired with a people-pleaser who never pointed out my problems, while it would have outwardly kept me from losing face, in reality it wouldn't have been of any real help, and there would have been no benefit to my life entry or the church's work.
Yes.
From this, I gained a path of practice. I understood that in the future, I shouldn't prefer only favorable and pleasing comments, or only consider my own reputation. I should accept being dealt with and seek the truth with regard to people's criticisms, reflect on myself, and promptly repent. Only by partnering with others in this way could I fulfill my duty and responsibility well.
It's true. Your fellowship has shown me that to have an upright person with the sense of justice by our side, to promptly remind us and point out issues that we may not notice ourselves, isn't a bad thing at all. It's actually an advantage.
That's right. When we act in violation of principle, or do our duty with a corrupt disposition, and ultimately harm our work, what we need isn't a few superficial words of encouragement, but for someone to directly point out the causes and effects of our issue, to allow us to reflect and know ourselves. Only this is truly helpful.
Yes. You guys have got it right. Later, I openly fellowshipped with Li Xiao about everything I had learned. Afterwards, we both felt deeply liberated, and I could finally partner with her normally again.
It was wonderful.
Yes.
Thank God. One time, a newcomer was experiencing some issues, so I fellowshipped with him on my understanding. But when Li Xiao heard what I'd said, she told me that I had only offered the newcomer slight encouragement, but wouldn't resolve his issue. I felt a bit embarrassed by what she'd said. Outwardly, I showed that I accepted her comment, but inside, I was unhappy with her. But then, I realized my state was incorrect, so I promptly prayed to God. I thought of God's words. In being able to perform your duties now, what's most important is that you learn to submit. That you learn to submit to the truth and to that which comes from God. In this way, you can learn a lesson in following God, and you can gradually enter the reality of the truth.
Amen.
Amen.
Indeed. When faced with problems, we must accept speech that accords with the truth and is beneficial to our duty. This is God's demand, and it is what we must do. Since Li Xiao had pointed out my problem, I should accept her criticism, seek and reflect. Through prayer and meditation, I found I really hadn't fully grasped the newcomer's issue, and hadn't fellowshipped specifically enough. Through reading God's words, I gained some insight on my mistakes and inadequacies, and gained more insight into this aspect of the truth.
Thank God.
I really saw how having a partner like that by my side was incredibly beneficial both for my life entry and for performing my duty.
Yes.
I also felt the benefits of accepting the criticism of others. From now on, I will accept my brothers' and sisters' criticisms and do my duty well.
Thank God.